Marcus Green was 71 years old and had lived beside the forest long enough to know when something wasn't right. That morning, the woods were too still. No birds, no wind, just silence pressing in from the trees. When he stepped onto his porch, he saw them, two small figures standing at the edge of his land. They weren't animals, and they weren't human. One of them collapsed. The other didn't run. It stayed close, watching Marcus, waiting. In that moment, he understood something that unsettled him deeply. They hadn't wandered there by accident. They had come to him on purpose. That Marcus knew that if he turned away, no one would ever know. But he also knew that once he stepped forward, his quiet life would never be the same again. Marcus Green had lived alone for nearly a decade. His small house sat at the edge of a wide stretch of forest, far enough from town that traffic noise never reached him, close enough that the trees felt like permanent neighbors. He chose the place for its quiet. After his wife passed, silence became something he needed, not something he feared. Marcus was retired, having spent most of his life working with his hands. His days followed the same steady pattern. He woke before sunrise, brewed his coffee the same way every morning, and sat by the window until the light crept through the trees. When his body allowed it, he split wood, handled small repairs, and kept his property in order. He respected the land by not pushing into the forest unless he had a reason. He didn't believe in stories. Legends, rumors, and campfire talk meant nothing to him. To Marcus, the woods were simply part of the landscape, home to animals, changing seasons, and nothing more. He trusted what he could see and explained life was predictable, quiet, and undisturbed. That routine mattered to him. He had no reason to expect it would change, and no way of knowing that before the day ended. The forest he had always left alone would come to him instead. It was either late afternoon or just after first light. The kind of time when the forest is quiet, but watchful. Marcus was outside, moving slowly across his yard, when something caught his attention near the far edge of his land. At first, it was only movement, brief and low to the ground, just beyond the line, where the grass met the trees. His first thought was animals. Deer often passed through, and smaller creatures sometimes wandered close, especially when food was scarce. Marcus stopped and watched without calling out, giving the movement time to reveal itself. He had learned long ago that rushing only made wildlife disappear. The movement came again, closer this time. Two shapes separated from the shadows beneath the trees. They were small, much smaller than any bear, and they didn't move like deer. They hesitated, stepping forward and then back, as if unsure whether to continue. Marcus felt a tightening in his chest. Not fear exactly, but confusion. He stayed where he was, hands at his sides, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The figures were upright, though not fully straight, and they seemed to watch him as much as he watched them. For a moment, he wondered if they were children. That thought passed quickly. They were covered in dark hair, their movements careful and uneven, like they were tired or hurt. One leaned slightly into the other, relying on it for balance. Marcus didn't move closer. He didn't reach for anything. He simply stood there, breathing steadily, aware that whatever stood at the edge of his property did not belong to any ordinary explanation. Still, shock hadn't set in yet. Only the quiet understanding that something was wrong, and that whatever those small figures were, they hadn't come by accident. Marcus expected them to run. That was what animals did when a human stood in the open, watching. He shifted his weight slightly, the gravel crunching under his boot, and waited for the sudden retreat back into the trees. It never came. Instead, the two small figures remained where they were. One took a hesitant step forward and then stopped, as if its strength gave out. Its knees buckled, and it sank to the ground without a sound. The second moved immediately, closing the distance and lowering itself beside the fallen one. It didn't panic. It didn't flee. It stayed. That was the moment Marcus felt something change inside him. Fear gave way to recognition, not of what they were, but of what they needed. The one still standing placed an arm across the other's shoulders, pulling it close in a gesture that felt deliberate and protective. Marcus had seen the same motion countless times in parents steadying children, siblings helping one another walk. There was nothing wild or frantic about it. Only exhaustion. Marcus met their eyes then. They were dark and alert, but dulled by fatigue. There was fear there, yes, but it was mixed with something else. Expectation. The kind that comes when there are no options left. He realized they weren't wandering. They hadn't stumbled onto his land by chance. They had crossed open ground, left the safety of the trees, and stopped where they could be seen. That choice alone told him everything he needed to know. They had come to him because they believed he would help. Marcus stayed still, letting the understanding settle. He didn't speak. He didn't reach out. He simply nodded once, slowly, as if answering a question that had never been asked out loud. In that quiet moment, the distance between man and forest closed not through words or force, but through a shared recognition of need. Marcus felt fear then, but it was the steady kind, not panic. The kind that comes with understanding the weight of a moment. Everything in him told him this was not something he could explain to anyone else. He could already imagine the looks he would get, the questions that would follow, and the consequences that would come from speaking this single word. He considered walking away. He could turn back toward his house, close the door, and let the forest take back what belonged to it. No one would ever know. His life could return to its familiar rhythm before nightfall. That choice stood in front of him, clear and simple, but logic followed close behind fear. Marcus knew that if he contacted anyone, authorities, doctors, officials, it would not end with help. It would end with confinement, testing, and separation. Whatever those small beings were, they would lose any chance of safety the moment they were discovered. Marcus had lived long enough to understand how systems worked. Good intentions rarely protected the vulnerable. Curiosity and control always came first. He looked again at the two figures at the edge of his land. One was barely upright now. The other remained close, refusing to leave. Marcus thought of the years behind him, the things he had done right, and the things he still carried regret over. This moment felt like one of those rare chances life gives, where the right choice is quiet and unseen. He didn't make a speech. He didn't promise anything. He simply took a slow step forward, then another, keeping his hands visible and his movements calm. In that simple act, the decision was made. He would help them, not as a hero, not as a witness, but as a man answering a need placed directly in front of him. Marcus moved slowly, deliberately, aware that sudden actions could frighten them. He kept his distance at first, speaking in soft, even tones, though he didn't know if they understood the words. His presence alone seemed to matter. The smaller of the two leaned heavily against the other, exhaustion clear in every movement. He fetched a bowl of water and placed it gently on the ground. The weaker one hesitated, sniffed, then lapped at it carefully. Marcus watched, never rushing, giving them space to decide for themselves. He broke some bread into small pieces and laid it nearby. They ate slowly, each bite deliberate, and he noted that the stronger one nudged the other to encourage it. Looking closer, he saw faint scratches along their arms and legs. Nothing deep, but enough to sting and slow them down. Marcus took a clean cloth and dampened it with warm water, gently dabbing at the small wounds. No bandages, no harsh cleaning, just quiet attention. The weaker one flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. The trust was there, fragile but growing. He stayed with them for hours, watching every movement, offering warmth and calm reassurance. The stronger one shifted to shield the weaker whenever Marcus reached toward it, instinctive and careful. By evening, the smaller one had rested slightly, sitting upright and breathing a little easier. Marcus knew this was only temporary relief, but it was progress. There was no triumph in his actions, only steady, practical care. This was the only way he could help, Patient, realistic, nurturing, and careful. He had no magic, no dramatic rescue. Just a quiet man offering his knowledge, his hands, and his presence to those who needed it most. In that simplicity, the bond began soft, cautious, and real. By mid-morning, Marcus knew he needed to understand why the babies had wandered so far from the forest. He moved cautiously, following the faint path that led from the edge of his property into the trees. Every step was deliberate, careful not to disturb what remained hidden. Broken branches and trampled undergrowth marked a clear passage. The ground was disturbed as though something heavy had moved through in a hurry, leaving its story written in the forest floor. Marcus paused, scanning for signs of struggle, and noticed dark streaks along the leaves and roots. Blood. Small, scattered, not abundant, but enough to tell him that something serious had occurred. He knelt and examined the impressions left behind. Large footprints, much bigger than any human, pressed into the soft earth. The shape was unmistakable, deliberate, and heavy. These tracks told him a story. A parent, a protector, had been here, trying to carry or guide the young. And yet, the trail faded as it moved away, stopping abruptly. Marcus's heart sank. He understood, slowly, carefully, that their mother likely hadn't survived whatever had caused the initial chaos. There was no dramatics, no exaggerated scene of horror, but the truth was enough. These small creatures had lost the one who could protect them, and they had come searching for someone else to care for them. He took a steady breath and rose. The forest was quiet again, the birds unaware of the events, the wind moving gently through the branches. But Marcus felt the weight of what had happened pressing on him. There was sorrow here, silent but heavy. And now he understood why the babies had sought him. They were alone, and they needed someone to help them survive. No words were necessary. The forest had told its story, and Marcus knew the responsibility had fallen to him. Night fell slowly over Marcus's property. The forest outside his windows grew darker, the trees casting long shadows across the yard. Marcus sat beside the two small creatures, now settled on a blanket near the hearth. The weaker one was curled into the stronger's side, shivering slightly. Exhausted from the journey and their injuries, he stayed awake, even as fatigue tugged at his own body. His eyes traced the soft rise and fall of their chests, counting breaths the way a nurse might count a patient's pulse. Every sound, the crackle of the fire, the whistle of wind through the trees, was magnified in the quiet room. He wanted to know the moment anything changed, the instant they needed help. The weaker baby stirred occasionally, struggling to sit upright, flinching at small sounds. Marcus reached out slowly, hand hovering above, never touching unless needed. When he spoke, it was in quiet murmurs, soft syllables that carried no demand. "It's all right," he whispered. "Rest, you're safe here." He did not expect them to understand the words, only the intent. Hours passed in this calm vigilance. Marcus's mind wandered, but his attention remained tethered to the babies. The stronger one shifted, nudging the weaker to encourage it to stay still, to breathe evenly. Marcus felt the weight of the responsibility pressing on him, but he also felt the bond forming. It was not immediate trust, nothing so simple, but a fragile understanding that he would not harm them. Outside, the forest was alive with its nocturnal rhythms. Yet the house remained a small island of stillness. Marcus thought of nothing else, no past regrets, no worries of the world beyond. There was only this, two tiny lives, fragile and exhausted, depending entirely on him for the night. By dawn, the weaker one had rested more fully, the shivers lessened, and a slow rhythm returned to its breathing. Marcus, tired but attentive, realized this long night had marked the turning point. This was the emotional heart of the story, not a dramatic rescue, but patient, quiet care. And the first sign that perhaps, for now, they might survive. In that silent night, Marcus learned something simple. True help does not need applause. It only needs presence. Before dawn, The forest outside Marcus's windows shifted in a way he could feel more than see. The usual quiet of early morning carried a weight, a presence that pressed against the edges of the clearing. Marcus sensed movement, heavy and deliberate, something large passing through the trees. He didn't panic. Years of living alone had taught him to observe before reacting. He stayed still, quiet, letting the forest reveal what it needed to. From the shadows, two figures emerged, tall, broad, and covered in dark fur. They moved with control and purpose, each step measured, almost deliberate. Marcus's heart raced, but not with fear. He understood instantly. These were the parents, the protectors, the source of the small lives he had been caring for. They did not approach aggressively. There were no growls, no threatening motions, only watchful control, their gaze fixed on the small figures near him. Every movement radiated caution, authority, and silent evaluation. He remained calm and still, hands relaxed, eyes lowered just slightly, letting them see that he posed no threat. The babies, sensing the arrival, stayed quiet. The stronger one shifted slightly, remaining between Marcus and the weaker one. Protective yet cautious, time seemed to stretch. The forest was alive with tension, but it was measured and quiet, not chaotic. Marcus felt a mutual awareness building, and understanding that he had cared for the young ones without harming them, and that the adults recognized it. In those minutes, the distance between human and forest closed in a subtle, almost unspoken way. The adults circled, watching, assessing, their presence both commanding and restrained. Marcus remained motionless, steady in breath and heart, a quiet partner in a silent exchange. The forest had answered, and in its answer was a recognition that trust, once earned, was not easily forgotten. The adults lingered at the edge of the clearing, watching every movement. Marcus stayed still, letting them decide the pace. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, one of the larger figures stepped back, creating a path. It was an invitation, quiet and measured, allowing him to move closer to the weaker baby without fear. Marcus approached with steady hands, careful not to startle either the young one or its guardian. He gently adjusted the baby's position, supporting its small, trembling frame. Every motion was slow, deliberate, practical care born from experience, not dramatics. He offered water, checked for warmth, and ensured it could breathe more easily. From the shadows, the adult Bigfoot remained still but aware, watching every move. There was no aggression, no growl, no sudden movement. Then, a small, almost imperceptible nod of the head, a silent acknowledgement. A recognition that Marcus had helped without harm, that he had acted out of care rather than curiosity or self-interest. No one shouted. No one demanded attention. There was no spectacle, no dramatic display. The trust that formed in that quiet moment carried more weight than any noise could. The babies sensed it, settling slightly against Marcus's hands and chest. This was the moment that shocked the world, not through fear, not through violence, not through headlines, but through the quiet power of empathy and care. It was proof that connection, understanding, and trust could cross boundaries that were otherwise thought impossible. In the soft light of dawn, Marcus realized the full depth of what had happened. A bridge had been built between species. With nothing more than calm presence and compassion. By mid-morning, the forest had quieted again. The two adult Bigfoots gently gathered the babies and without a sound, moved back into the shadows. Marcus watched until they disappeared completely, leaving no trace of their passage except the faint impressions in the soft earth. The babies were safe, carried by the very protectors who had allowed him to help, and Marcus felt a deep, unspoken relief. He returned to his daily routine as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Coffee brewed, firewood stacked, small repairs attended to life resumed its calm rhythm. Yet beneath the familiar motions, Marcus carried a secret that would never be shared. He knew that telling anyone would break the fragile trust and perhaps endanger the creatures he had helped. The world could not understand, and that was exactly why he remained silent. Occasionally, subtle signs reminded him that they had not forgotten him. A footprint near the edge of his property, a distant shadow among the trees, a fleeting rustle in the undergrowth, small, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. He never approached, never sought them out. The forest was theirs, and he had been allowed into that world for a moment that would last a lifetime in memory. In the quiet of his home, Marcus reflected on what had happened. Compassion had crossed boundaries he had never imagined, bridging the human and the wild in a way that required no words, no fanfare, no spectacle. He had learned that true care is patient, humble, and unwavering, and that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences are the ones kept quietly in the heart.